My name is Samuel Washington, and I'm 68 years old. Been carrying that name with pride since the day my mama gave it to me in a little shotgun house on the south side of Atlanta, back when that neighborhood was nothing but dirt roads and big dreams. Now, sitting here in this 4-bedroom brick house I built with my own 2 hands, I got to tell you something that's been weighing heavy on my heart like wet concrete in July. See, I spent 43 years swinging hammers, laying foundation, and breaking my back so my children could have what I never did. Started as a day laborer when I was 16, barely had shoes that fit right, but I had something my daddy taught me before the cancer took him: integrity. Boy, he used to say, wiping the sweat from his brow after 12 hours at the lumber mill. A man ain't nothing without his word and his work ethic. You remember that. Lord knows I remembered. By the time I was 25, I was running crews for Henderson Construction, the biggest black-owned company in Georgia back then. Made foreman at 30, and that's when I met my Loretta. Beautiful woman with a smile that could light up the whole job site, and sense enough to see past these calloused hands to the man underneath. We got married in 1982, bought our first little house in East Point, and started building something real together. Loretta gave me 3 children, Michael in 83, Denise in 85, and Jerome in 88. Each one of them babies represented another reason to work harder, save more, build bigger. I'd come home covered in sawdust and cement, and Loretta would have dinner waiting while I helped with homework. "Daddy's building us a future," she'd tell them when they complained about my long hours. "Every brick he lays is for y'all." She wasn't lying either. Started my own company in 92, Washington Construction and Contracting. Took every dollar we had saved, plus a loan against the house Loretta didn't want me to take but trusted me enough to sign anyway. First year was rough, eating peanut butter sandwiches while I bid on jobs that barely covered materials. But I built my reputation the same way I built everything else, one solid foundation at a time. By 2000, I had 12 full-time employees and contracts all over the metro area. We did everything from residential additions to small commercial projects. Made enough to move the family to this house in Stonecrest. 4 bedrooms, 3 baths, and a 2-car garage. Loretta cried when she saw the master bathroom with the garden tub she'd always wanted. "Samuel," she said, running her fingers along the marble countertop I'd installed myself, "look what the Lord has blessed us with." But the real blessing was watching my children grow up with opportunities I never had. Michael played football at MLK High School and earned a partial scholarship to Georgia State. I covered the rest: tuition, room and board, books, everything. Denise wanted to be a teacher, so I paid for her education degree at Spelman. Jerome had his heart set on business school at Emory, and even though that tuition could have bought 2 new trucks for the company, I wrote those checks with pride. See, this is what I thought building wealth meant: creating stepping stones for the next generation. Every Saturday morning job, every late-night estimate, every time I chose overtime over rest, it was all for them. Loretta used to joke that I loved concrete more than I loved her, but she knew the truth. I was pouring that foundation because a man who doesn't invest in his children's future ain't much of a man at all. When Loretta got sick in 2018, the doctor said the chemo treatments might work, but they'd cost more than insurance would cover. Didn't matter. I liquidated half my retirement account, took out a second mortgage, and sold 2 of my rental properties. We were gonna fight that cancer with everything we had. Lost her anyway. The day we laid Loretta to rest at Southview Cemetery, my children stood beside me at that graveside, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, completely alone. Not because they weren't there, but because something in their eyes had changed. Where I used to see gratitude and love, now I saw calculation, like they were already dividing up what was left. Maybe I should have recognized the signs then. Maybe I should have paid attention to how quickly the conversation turned from mourning their mama to asking about life insurance policies and property deeds. But grief has a way of making you vulnerable, and I guess I just wanted to keep giving them everything I could, thinking that's what Loretta would have wanted. That was 6 years ago. 6 years of watching my children treat me like an ATM machine with a heartbeat. 6 years of realizing that all those foundations I'd laid, all those opportunities I'd built for them, hadn't taught them a damn thing about respect, gratitude, or family loyalty. But last Thursday, Thanksgiving Day 2024, that all changed. Because sometimes a man reaches a point where he stops building bridges for people who keep burning them down behind him. Sometimes a man has to tear down what he built and start over again. And sometimes, just sometimes, that's exactly what his children need to learn about the difference between earning something and just expecting it to be handed to you. The first crack appeared about 3 months after we buried Loretta. Michael showed up at my door on a Tuesday evening, still wearing his suit from his job at the insurance company downtown. Now let me tell you about Michael. My eldest, the one who was supposed to set the example. 6'2", broad shoulders like his daddy. But somewhere along the way, he developed this entitled attitude that rubbed against everything I'd tried to teach him. "Dad, we need to talk," he said, not even bothering with a proper greeting. Just walked right into my living room like he owned the place. I was eating leftover meatloaf at the kitchen table, still in my work clothes from a residential job in Decatur. "What's on your mind, son?" "It's about Mom's life insurance money. You know, the policy you cashed in for her treatments didn't pay out, but she had that smaller policy through the teachers' union. $25,000. He sat down across from me, leaning forward like he was about to negotiate a business deal. "I think we should split it 3 ways. Me, Denise, and Jerome." I set down my fork real slow. "Son, that money's already spent. Funeral costs, hospital bills your mama accumulated, the headstone." "Dad, come on." He waved his hand dismissively. "You've got the house, the business, rental income. You don't need it like we do. I'm trying to put a down payment on a place in Buckhead, and 25 grand would really help out." Buckhead. The boy wanted to live in Buckhead, where condos cost more than I paid for my whole house. "Michael, I worked 60-hour weeks for 30 years to build what I got. If you want a house in Buckhead, maybe you should work some overtime yourself." That's when I saw it. That look. Like I was being selfish for not handing over money I'd already spent on his mama's final arrangements. He left that night without saying goodbye, and I should have known right then that this conversation was just the beginning. Denise came next, about 2 weeks later. My daughter had always been the smart one, graduated summa cum laude from Spelman, but somewhere between her education degree and her marriage to that no-account Marcus Thompson, she'd developed expensive tastes that her teacher's salary couldn't support. "Daddy," she said, sitting on my porch swing where she used to love spending Sunday afternoons when she was little, "Marcus and I are having some financial difficulties." "What kind of difficulties?" I asked, though I had a feeling I knew where this was headed. "Well, we bought this house in South Fulton, you know, thinking I'd get that promotion to assistant principal, but the position went to someone else. Our mortgage payment is $800 more than we can afford, and we're already 3 months behind. $800 a month. That's what my entire house payment used to be back in the day. Denise, baby, why didn't y'all buy something you could actually afford?" She looked at me like I just asked her why she needed air to breathe. "Daddy, we can't live in some little starter home. Marcus has an image to maintain with his clients, and I need to live in a neighborhood that reflects my education level. Your education level don't pay the mortgage, sweetheart. Your job does. That's why I'm asking for help, just until things turn around. Maybe you could co-sign a refinance loan, or help with a few payments. You know, like you did for Jerome when he was starting his business. Jerome, that was the knife that cut deepest. My youngest boy had convinced me 2 years ago that he needed $50,000 to start a consulting firm. Dad, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, he'd said with that smooth talk he'd perfected in business school. I've got clients lined up, office space picked out, everything. I just need startup capital. So I liquidated one of my retirement accounts, paid the early withdrawal penalties, and handed my baby boy a check that represented 2 years of careful saving. 6 months later, the consulting firm was nothing but a fancy website and a rented desk in a co-working space. Jerome was driving a new BMW and talking about pivoting to real estate development, but he couldn't show me a single client or a penny of profit. When I asked about the money, he got defensive. Dad, building a business takes time. Rome wasn't built in a day. Rome wasn't built with their daddy's retirement money either. I'd shot back, but he just laughed it off. That was Jerome's specialty, laughing everything off, treating serious conversations like they were jokes. Even when I found out he'd used part of that money to take his girlfriend on a vacation to Jamaica, while I was eating beans and rice to stretch my grocery budget. But you know what really opened my eyes? It was Marcus, my grandson. 8 years old, bright as a new penny, and the only person in that whole family who seemed to remember that I was more than just a walking wallet. Marcus started showing up at my house after school sometimes, riding his bike the 4 blocks from his bus stop to my front door. At first I thought maybe Denise was having him check on me, but it didn't take long to figure out the real reason. "Grandpa Sam," he said one afternoon sitting at my kitchen table working on his homework, "why doesn't Daddy come visit you anymore?" I looked up from the newspaper I was reading. "What do you mean, little man?" "Well, Uncle Michael only comes when he needs money for something, and Mommy gets all stressed out before she comes over here. But Daddy says you're just a grumpy old man who doesn't understand how the world works now." That hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. My own son-in-law talking about me like that in front of my grandson. But Marcus, bless his heart, didn't see it that way. "I think you're the smartest person I know, Grandpa Sam. You built our whole family from nothing, just like you built all those houses, out of the mouths of babes." That's when I started really paying attention to the pattern. Every phone call was about money. Every visit had an agenda. Christmas, birthdays, Father's Day, they all came with their hands out, expecting me to cover restaurant bills, buy expensive gifts, or fund their latest financial emergency. And the disrespect kept growing. Michael would show up with his girlfriend, a 25-year-old named Jasmine who looked at my modest furniture and outdated television like they offended her personally. Jerome would interrupt me mid-sentence to take phone calls about his latest business scheme. Denise would bring Marcus over but spend the whole visit on her phone, coordinating her social calendar. Nobody asked about my day, my health, or how I was handling life without their mother. Nobody offered to help with yard work, house maintenance, or even grocery shopping. I was just the old man with the checkbook, useful when they needed something but invisible the rest of the time. The breaking point should have come months ago. Maybe it should have come when Michael borrowed $5,000 for a business opportunity that turned out to be some multi-level marketing scheme, or when Jerome asked me to co-sign a lease on a luxury apartment in Atlanta because his credit was shot, or when Denise suggested I sell the house and move into a senior living facility so she could use her inheritance early. But sometimes it takes something really stark to wake you up. Sometimes you need to see exactly how far your own children are willing to let disrespect go. And last Thursday, on what should have been a day of gratitude and family togetherness, that wake-up call came in the form of my grandson standing outside in the cold November rain, crying because his own family had locked him out of the house where they were celebrating Thanksgiving. That's when 43 years of patience, sacrifice, and turning the other cheek came to an end. That's when Samuel Washington stopped being their personal ATM and started being their father again. Thanksgiving morning started like they all had since Loretta passed. Me standing alone in my kitchen at 6 a.m., seasoning a 20-pound turkey that would feed twice as many people as actually cared about spending time with me. But that's what you do when you're the patriarch of a family, even when that family treats you more like hired help than the man who built their foundation. I'd been up since 4:30, prepping vegetables, mixing cornbread dressing from Loretta's recipe, and getting the sweet potato casserole ready for the oven. My arthritic hands were already aching from all the chopping and stirring. But I pushed through it because this was what we did. This was tradition. Michael called around 8, just as I was putting the turkey in the oven. "Hey, Dad, just confirming we're still on for 3 o'clock. Jasmine's bringing her famous green bean casserole." He paused, and I could hear that tone creeping into his voice. "Oh, and we're going to need to talk later about that investment opportunity I mentioned. The window closes next week, and I really need to move on it." Investment opportunity. That's what he called his schemes now. Last month it was cryptocurrency. Before that it was some franchise deal for smoothie shops. Always needed money, always had a deadline, always had some reason why this time was different. "We'll see, son. Let's just focus on having a good family dinner." "Sure, Dad. But just keep it in mind. This could really change things for me and Jasmine." I hung up feeling that familiar weight in my chest. Even on Thanksgiving, it was about what I could do for him, not about us coming together as a family. Denise showed up first, around 2:30, with Marcus in tow. My grandson ran straight to me like he always did, wrapping his arms around my waist while his mama barely looked up from her phone. "Hey, Daddy," Denise said, finally acknowledging my presence. "Something smells good. I brought mac and cheese from Kroger." Hope that's okay. Between work and Marcus's soccer schedule, I just didn't have time to cook. Store-bought mac and cheese. For Thanksgiving. From a woman whose grandmother taught her to make it from scratch before she was 10 years old. But I bit my tongue because Marcus was already telling me about his latest school project. His face lit up with excitement. Grandpa Sam, we had to write about our family heroes, and I wrote about you. Want to hear it? Before I could answer, Denise cut in. Marcus, honey, Grandpa's busy getting dinner ready. Maybe later. Then she turned to me with that expression I'd come to recognize, the one that meant she needed something. Daddy, Marcus needs new cleats for soccer. The good ones cost about $150, and with Christmas coming up, Mama, I told you I could use my old ones. Marcus said quietly, looking embarrassed. Hush, baby. Adults are talking. Denise waved him off like he was bothering her. What do you say, Daddy? Early Christmas present for your favorite grandson. Favorite grandson. He was my only grandson, but she said it like there was competition. Like his worth to me was tied to how much money I spent on him. Jerome arrived last, of course, rolling up in that BMW at 3:15, with music thumping loud enough to wake the dead. He strolled in wearing a designer suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, carrying a bottle of wine that still had the price tag on it, $12.99 from the gas station. Sorry I'm late, Pops, he said, not sounding sorry at all. Had to take an important call from a potential investor. Big things happening in the real estate game. Big things. Always big things with Jerome, but never any actual results. Your mama always said punctuality was a form of respect, I told him, taking his jacket. Yeah, well, Mama never had to deal with millionaire investors either. He laughed that dismissive laugh of his. Times have changed, old man. You can't run business on farm time anymore. Farm time. Like the work ethic that built everything he'd inherited was somehow outdated. We sat down to dinner, and for about 10 minutes, it almost felt like family. Marcus said grace in his clear, sweet voice, thanking God for food, family, and Grandpa Sam who worked so hard to take care of everybody. The boy's words hit me right in the heart, but I noticed none of the adults said amen with any real feeling. Then the conversation started, and I realized this wasn't going to be the peaceful family gathering I'd hoped for. So, Dad, Michael started, cutting into his turkey. Jasmine and I have been talking about our future, and we really think this investment opportunity could set us up for life. It's a ground floor opportunity with a tech startup that's developing apps for construction companies. Right in your wheelhouse, you know? My wheelhouse is actually building things that people can see and use, I said, not throwing money at some kid with a computer and a dream. Jasmine, who'd been quiet up until now, decided to chime in. Mr. Washington, with respect, that kind of thinking is why your generation didn't build generational wealth. You have to think bigger, take risks. This 25-year-old girl, who'd never worked a day in construction, telling me about building wealth. I felt my jaw clench, but I kept eating. Actually, Denise jumped in, Daddy did build wealth. The question is what happens to it next. I mean, this house is just sitting here with one person in it, when it could be generating income or helping the family grow their investments. There it was, the vultures circling. I think what Denise is trying to say, Jerome added with a mouthful of food, is that you're sitting on assets that aren't working for you. Real estate in this area is hot right now. You could sell this place, move somewhere smaller, and free up capital for all of us to use more productively. All of us. Like my life's work was some kind of family investment fund that they all had claims on. This is my home, I said quietly. The home I built with your mama, where y'all grew up, where your grandchildren should be able to visit their granddaddy. Grandpa Sam, Marcus said suddenly, are you going to move away? The fear in that little boy's voice cut through all the financial talk like a knife, but before I could reassure him, Denise shushed him again. Marcus, grown folks are talking. Why don't you go play in the living room? But, Mama, I want to stay with Grandpa. Boy, I said go. Her voice was sharp enough to make him flinch. That's when I saw it. The same dismissive attitude they showed me, now being passed down to the next generation. My grandson, the one bright spot in this whole family, being treated like his feelings didn't matter because he was inconvenient to their money conversation. Maybe we should change the subject, I suggested, trying to keep the peace. Or maybe we should be realistic, Michael said. Dad, you're 68 years old. What happens if you get sick? What happens if you need long-term care? All this wealth you've built up could disappear to medical bills and nursing home costs. Wouldn't it make more sense to transfer some of it now, while you're healthy, so the family can benefit? The family, not me, not even including me in the family. Your mama and I planned for those contingencies, I said. I got long-term care insurance, health savings accounts, and enough put away to handle whatever comes up. But why take that risk? Jerome pressed. Look, I've got connections now. Real estate developers who could turn this property into something that generates serious income. We're talking about building wealth for Marcus's generation, not just hoarding it. Hoarding. My life savings, my home, my security. All of it was hoarding to them. I looked around that table at faces that looked like mine, at children I'd sacrificed everything for, and I realized something that hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. They weren't talking about my future. They weren't concerned about my well-being or my happiness. They were talking about their inheritance like I was already dead. And little Marcus, who'd been sent away from the table for wanting to be part of the family conversation, was the only one who actually treated me like I mattered. We'll see, I said, which was what I always said when I needed time to think. But inside, something was shifting. 43 years of putting their needs before mine. And this is what it had gotten me. Children who saw me as an obstacle between them and money they hadn't earned. The storm clouds were gathering, and I could feel the electricity in the air. But I didn't know yet that the real thunder was still coming. I didn't know that in just a few hours, I'd discover exactly how far their disrespect could go. I didn't know that my grandson, the only one who loved me for who I was instead of what I had, was about to become the final straw that broke this old man's patience forever. After dinner, they all settled into my living room like they owned the place. Michael had loosened his tie and was scrolling through his phone, probably looking up more investment opportunities. Jerome was sprawled across my recliner, Loretta's favorite chair, talking loudly on a business call about some deal in Marietta. Denise and Jasmine were huddled together on the couch, whispering about Black Friday shopping plans and complaining about how full they were from my cooking. I was in the kitchen, doing what I always did after these family gatherings, cleaning up the mess by myself while they enjoyed the comfort I'd provided. 43 years of hosting holidays, and not one of them had ever offered to help with the dishes. Not once. The rain had started around 4 o'clock, a cold November shower that tapped against the windows like skeletal fingers. I could hear it getting heavier as I scraped plates and loaded the dishwasher, thinking about how this was probably the last Thanksgiving I'd host if they kept treating me like hired help in my own home. That's when I realized I hadn't seen Marcus in a while. "Denise," I called out, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "Where's Marcus?" "He's around somewhere," she said without looking up from her phone. "Probably playing with those toys you bought him last time." But something didn't feel right. The house was too quiet. Marcus was usually chattering away, asking me questions about everything from construction techniques to family history. The boy had curiosity that reminded me of myself at that age, always wanting to know how things worked and why people made the choices they did. I walked through the living room, past my children and their entitled attitudes, and checked the bedrooms. No Marcus. Checked the basement where I keep my workshop. No Marcus. Even looked in the closets, thinking maybe he was playing hide-and-seek by himself. That's when I heard it. A sound that cut through the rain and the mindless chatter from the living room, like a knife through my chest. Crying. A child's crying, muffled but desperate. I followed the sound to the front of the house and looked out the window. What I saw made my blood run cold and my hands shake with rage I hadn't felt since the day some racist contractor tried to stiff me on a payment back in '95. My grandson was sitting on the front porch steps, soaked to the bone from the rain, his little body shaking from cold and fear. He was wearing the same church clothes he'd worn to dinner, a white button-down shirt and black slacks that were now plastered to his small frame. His hair was dripping wet, and he was hugging his knees to his chest, crying in that quiet, hopeless way that children cry when they think nobody cares enough to help them. I yanked open the front door so hard it rattled the hinges. "Marcus, baby, what are you doing out here?" He looked up at me with tears streaming down his face, his lips blue from the cold. Grandpa Sam, I tried to come back inside, but the door is locked. I've been knocking, but nobody heard me. Locked. The front door was locked, and my grandson was trapped outside in a cold November rain, while his family sat inside my warm house, laughing and planning how to spend my money. How long have you been out here, little man? I don't know. A long time. I went outside to get my soccer ball from your truck, but when I tried to come back in, the door wouldn't open. I knocked and knocked, but the TV was too loud. I scooped him up in my arms, feeling how cold and wet he was, and carried him inside. His little body was shivering so hard I could feel it through my shirt. This was my grandson, the only person in that house who loved me unconditionally. And they had locked him outside like he was some stray dog. Let's get you dried off and warmed up, I said, grabbing a towel from the hallway closet. But before I took him to change clothes, I had something else to do. Something that had been building up for 6 years of disrespect, manipulation, and taking me for granted. I wrapped Marcus in the towel and sent him to my bedroom to change into some dry clothes I kept there for his visits. Then I walked into that living room where my 3 adult children and Jasmine were still lounging around like they didn't have a care in the world. The sight of them sitting there, comfortable and dry, while my grandson had been crying in the rain, triggered something primal in me. Something that went beyond disappointment or frustration. This was pure, righteous anger. The kind that comes when you realize you've enabled people to become the worst versions of themselves. I stood there for a moment, watching them. Michael, still on his phone, probably texting other people about money-making schemes. Jerome, laughing at something on his call, his feet up on my coffee table like he was in his own house. Denise, showing Jasmine something on social media, both of them giggling like teenage girls. None of them had even noticed that Marcus was missing. None of them cared enough to check on an 8-year-old child in their care. "Excuse me," I said, my voice carrying that tone Loretta used to call my construction foreman voice, the one that could stop a crew of grown men mid-conversation. They looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "Did any of y'all notice that Marcus was outside in the rain?" Denise blinked. "What? No, he's been playing somewhere." "Why?" "Because I just found him on the porch, soaked through, crying and cold. Says he's been out there for a long time because the front door got locked." "Oh." Denise shrugged like it was no big deal. "He must have gone out to play and forgot his key." Kids do that. Forgot his key. An 8-year-old child was supposed to remember to take a key when he went to get his ball from the truck. He doesn't have a key, Denise. And even if he did, somebody should have been watching him. Somebody should have noticed he wasn't in the house. "Dad, relax," Michael said without looking up from his phone. "Kids are resilient. A little rain never hurt anybody. A little rain." My grandson, shivering and crying and locked out of his own family's Thanksgiving celebration, was just a little rain to them. "Jerome," I said, my voice getting harder, "get off that phone." "Hold on, Pops. This is important. This investor is ready to—" That's when 43 years of patience ran out. I walked over to that dining room table where we'd just shared a meal I'd cooked, served, and would clean up by myself. I placed both hands on the polished wood surface, the same table where I'd helped them with homework, where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays, where Loretta and I had planned our family's future. Then I brought my right hand down on that table so hard every plate, glass, and piece of silverware jumped. The sound echoed through the house like a gunshot, and everyone in that living room froze. In the silence that followed, I looked at each one of them, these people who carried my DNA and my name, but had forgotten everything I'd tried to teach them about respect, family, and basic human decency. When I spoke, my voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of every sacrifice I'd made, every disappointment I'd swallowed, every time I'd turned the other cheek when I should have stood up for myself. "Pack your bags. Get out." 5 words. That's all it took to change everything. 5 words to end 6 years of being treated like an ATM machine instead of a father. 5 words to tell 3 grown adults that their free ride was over. 5 words that would teach them the difference between being entitled to something and actually earning it. The silence that followed was deafening. You could have heard a pin drop in that room. Michael's phone call had ended abruptly. Jerome was staring at me with his mouth open. Denise looked like I'd just told her the world was ending. Even Jasmine, who barely knew me, seemed to understand that something fundamental had just shifted. But I wasn't done. not by a long shot. Because sometimes a man has to tear down what he built before he can rebuild it properly, and sometimes the people you love the most are the ones who need the harshest lessons about respect. The silence stretched out like a fault line before an earthquake. I could see the shock rippling across their faces, but underneath that shock was something else. Calculation. They were already trying to figure out how to smooth this over, how to get back to business as usual where I provided everything and they took whatever they wanted. Michael was the first to recover, which didn't surprise me. He'd always been good at talking his way out of trouble. "Dad, come on now. You're being dramatic. We're family. We don't kick family out over a misunderstanding." Misunderstanding. That's what he called leaving my grandson outside in the rain. "This ain't no misunderstanding, son. This is the final straw on a camel's back that's been breaking for 6 years. Denise stood up from the couch, her face flushed with indignation. "Daddy, you can't be serious. Where am I supposed to take Marcus? It's Thanksgiving night, it's raining, and should have thought about that before you forgot you had a child to watch." I cut her off. "Should have thought about that before you let him get locked outside while y'all sat in here talking about how to spend my money." "We weren't talking about spending your money," Jerome said, finally putting his phone down. "We were talking about investment opportunities, about building family wealth. Boy, don't you dare try to pretty it up with fancy words. You were talking about how to get your hands on what I worked 43 years to build, just like you've been doing since your mama died." I walked over to the window and looked out at the rain, gathering my thoughts. Marcus was safe in my bedroom, probably changing into dry clothes and wondering why the grown-ups were yelling. That boy shouldn't have to see this. Shouldn't have to witness his family falling apart because his relatives couldn't show basic respect. But maybe it was time he learned some hard truths about the world. You want to know what the real problem is? I turned back to face them. The real problem is that I've been enabling y'all. Every time one of you came to me with your hand out, I gave you what you wanted instead of teaching you what you needed. Every time you disrespected me, I made excuses for you instead of holding you accountable. "Dad, we don't disrespect you," Michael said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Son, you asked me to liquidate my assets so you could invest in some app that don't even exist yet. You brought your girlfriend to my house so she could lecture me about generational wealth. You called the work ethic that built this family farm time like it was something to be ashamed of." My voice was rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "If that ain't disrespect, I don't know what is." Jasmine, who'd been quiet through all this, decided to speak up. "Mr. Washington, I think there's been a misunderstanding. We were just trying to help you maximize your potential." "Little girl," I said, and my tone made her close her mouth real quick. "You've been dating my son for 8 months. Don't you tell me about my potential. And don't you ever again suggest that a man who built a successful business from nothing needs financial advice from somebody who ain't never owned anything but a car payment." The color drained from her face, and she looked to Michael for support. But Michael was starting to realize that his usual smooth talk wasn't going to work this time. "Daddy," Denise tried again, her voice softer now. "Maybe we can talk about this after everyone's had time to cool down. I'll get Marcus and we can—" "Marcus stays here." The words came out harder than I intended, but I meant every one of them. "What?" Denise's voice went up an octave. "You can't keep my son. He's my child. He's my grandson, and he's the only one in this family who treats me with respect. He's the only one who visits me because he wants to, not because he needs something. And after what happened today, I don't trust y'all to take proper care of him." That hit them like a physical blow. Jerome actually stepped back, and Michael's jaw dropped open. "Dad, you can't be serious," Michael said. "You can't just take somebody's kid because you're mad." "I'm not taking him. I'm protecting him. From parents who are so busy worrying about money that they don't notice their child is missing for an hour. From a family that treats him like he's in the way when adults are talking about important things like inheritance and investment opportunities." The truth was settling over them like a heavy blanket. I could see it in their faces, the realization that this wasn't just about today, wasn't just about Marcus being locked outside. This was about years of accumulated disappointment, disrespect, and taking advantage of an old man's love. "Samuel Washington," Denise's voice cracked like a whip. "You give me my son right now, or I'm calling the police." "Go ahead," I said calmly. "Call them." Tell them how you lost track of your 8-year-old child during a rainstorm. Tell them how he was locked outside crying while his mama was inside planning shopping trips. See how that works out for you." She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it again. She knew I was right. Jerome tried a different approach. "Pops, look, maybe we got a little carried away with the business talk, but that's just because we're excited about opportunities, you know? We want the family to prosper." "The family?" I shook my head. "Boy, when was the last time you asked me how I was doing? When was the last time any of y'all called me just to check on me without needing money or wanting something?" They looked at each other, but nobody answered because they couldn't. The truth was right there in the silence. "When was the last time any of y'all offered to help me with anything? Yard work, groceries, fixing something around the house? Your mama's been gone 6 years, and not one of you has ever asked if I needed help or if I was lonely or if I was struggling with anything." "You never said you needed help," Denise said weakly. "I shouldn't have to ask my children to care about me. That should come naturally. But y'all have been so focused on what I could do for you that you forgot I'm a human being with feelings and needs of my own." I walked over to the mantelpiece where Loretta's picture sat in a silver frame. She was smiling in that photo, taken at our 25th anniversary dinner. Looking at her face, I could almost hear what she'd say about this situation. "Your mama would be heartbroken," I said quietly. "She gave birth to you, raised you, loved you unconditionally. She made sure you had everything you needed to succeed in life. And this is how you honor her memory. By treating her husband like he's just a source of funding for your dreams." "Dad, that's not fair," Michael said. "What's not fair is a man working his whole life to provide for his family, only to have that family treat him like he's already dead. What's not fair is an 8-year-old boy being the only person in this house who shows basic respect and consideration." I turned away from Loretta's picture and faced them again. My decision was made, and there was no going back. "Here's what's going to happen. Y'all are going to leave my house tonight. Denise, Marcus is staying with me until you prove you can be a responsible parent. And from now on, the Bank of Samuel Washington is permanently closed. No more loans, no more investments, no more bailouts. You want something, you earn it like everybody else." The shock on their faces was almost comical. Like I'd just told them gravity was going to start working backwards. "You can't do this," Jerome said, his voice rising. "You can't just cut off your own children. Watch me." And that's when I knew there was no going back. The foundation I'd built for this family had cracked beyond repair, and the only way forward was to tear it down completely and start over. Some structures can be renovated, but some are so damaged that the only solution is demolition. It was time to rebuild from the ground up, and this time, I was going to make sure the foundation was solid before I started adding anything else to it. They left that night, but not quietly. Michael slammed my front door so hard the windows rattled. Jerome peeled out of my driveway in that BMW, leaving tire marks on the concrete I'd poured myself 20 years ago. Denise cried and pleaded, but when she realized I wasn't backing down, she got nasty, throwing around threats about lawyers and grandparents' rights. "You'll regret this, Daddy," she said through tears that looked more angry than sad. "When you're old and sick and need us, remember this moment." But Marcus stayed. He sat at my kitchen table in dry clothes, eating leftover pie, and asked the question that had been weighing on his little heart. "Grandpa Sam, why is everybody so mad at you?" I sat down across from him, looking at this boy who had more sense at 8 years old than his parents did at 30-something. How do you explain to a child that sometimes the people who are supposed to love you the most are the ones who hurt you the deepest? Well, little man, sometimes grown-ups forget what's really important. They get so worried about money and things that they forget about treating people right. Is that why Mama and Uncle Michael and Uncle Jerome always ask you for money? Out of the mouths of babes, this boy had been watching, listening, understanding more than any of us gave him credit for. "Yeah, Marcus, that's part of it. But you work really hard for your money. You built all those houses and everything." He took another bite of pie, thinking it over. "Mama says I have to earn my allowance by doing chores. Shouldn't they have to earn stuff too? You're absolutely right, little man, and that's what they're going to learn." That night, after Marcus was asleep in the guest room, I sat in my home office surrounded by 43 years of financial records, business documents, and family photographs. Time to take inventory of exactly how much damage I'd let them do to my life's work. The numbers were staggering, even to me. In the 6 years since Loretta died, I'd given Michael over $85,000 in various investments and opportunities. The cryptocurrency scheme, the smoothie franchise, the multi-level marketing disaster, the tech startup, all of it gone with nothing to show for it but promises and excuses. Denise had cost me $47,000 in mortgage help, car payments, and credit card bailouts. Every time she and that worthless husband of hers made a financial decision they couldn't afford, they came running to me to fix it. Jerome was the worst. $120,000 for his consulting business that never consulted anybody. Another $30,000 when he decided to pivot to real estate development. $15,000 for his car when his credit got rejected. $8,000 for that Jamaica vacation while I was eating cereal for dinner to make my grocery budget stretch. Total damage, $305,000. More than half of my retirement savings, gone to fund their irresponsible choices and entitled lifestyles. But the money was just part of it. I pulled out a legal pad and started writing down every other way they'd taken advantage of me since Loretta passed. Free Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter dinners for 6 years, with me doing all the cooking, hosting, and cleanup while they showed up empty-handed or with gas station wine. Free babysitting for Marcus whenever Denise wanted to go out, but never any consideration for my own plans or health. Free use of my truck whenever one of their cars broke down, which was often since they bought vehicles they couldn't afford to maintain. Free handyman services. I'd fixed plumbing at Denise's house, painted Jerome's apartment, and installed a deck at Michael's place, all without compensation or even a thank you. The list went on for 3 pages. 3 pages of being taken for granted, disrespected, and treated like hired help by my own children. But I wasn't just going to sit there feeling sorry for myself. Samuel Washington didn't build a successful business by wallowing in problems. He built it by creating solutions. Friday morning, I called my lawyer, William Henderson, Jr. His daddy and I had been friends since the 1980s, and Will Jr. had been handling my legal affairs since he graduated from Emory Law 10 years ago. "Samuel, good to hear from you. How was your Thanksgiving?" "Educational," I said. "Will, I need to schedule an appointment. There are some changes I need to make to my estate planning, and I need them done quickly." "Of course. What kind of changes are we talking about?" "The kind that require a complete overhaul of everything we've set up. I'll explain when I see you." Next call was to my accountant, Margaret Ellis. She'd been doing my books since I started the business, and she knew my financial situation better than I did sometimes. "Maggie, it's Samuel. I need you to do something for me. I want a complete audit of every dollar I've given to my children over the past 6 years. Bank transfers, checks, payments made on their behalf, everything." "Samuel, that's going to be a lot of work. Are you sure?" "I'm sure. And Maggie, I also need you to help me set up some new financial structures. Trust accounts, college funds, that kind of thing. But not for who you might think." Then I called my banker, James Powell, who'd been managing my accounts at SunTrust for 15 years. "Jim, I need to restructure some things. I want to close the joint account I have with Michael, and I need to remove Denise and Jerome as authorized users on my credit cards. Today." "Samuel, are you sure? That's going to cause some complications if they're depending on—" "Jim, they're grown adults."
Time they started acting like it. By the time Marcus woke up for breakfast, I had appointments lined up for the next week that would fundamentally change how the Washington family operated. The boy ate his cereal and asked if he could help me with yard work that weekend, like it was the most natural thing in the world to offer assistance instead of asking for handouts. "Grandpa Sam, why do you always work so hard?" "Because that's how you build something that lasts, little man. You start with a solid foundation, and you don't take shortcuts." "Are you building something new now?" I looked at this 8-year-old boy who'd been abandoned by his own family, but still had kindness in his heart and respect for the people who took care of him. "Yeah, Marcus. I'm building something new. Something better." The phone started ringing around noon. Michael first, trying to sound casual but clearly panicked because his debit card had been declined at some expensive restaurant. "Dad, there seems to be some problem with the account. The card isn't working." "No problem, son. I closed that account this morning. Like I told you last night, the Bank of Samuel Washington is closed for business." "You can't be serious." "I have bills due, commitments.
Then I suggest you figure out how to pay them with the money you earn at your job. Denise called an hour later, crying about her credit card being rejected at Target. Daddy, please, I just needed some things for Marcus.
Clothes and school supplies. Marcus has everything he needs right here. You worry about taking care of yourself. Jerome's call came that evening, and he was furious. Pops, what the hell is this about? You can't just cut people off without warning. Watch me. And don't you curse at me in my own house, even if it's over the phone. That weekend, while Marcus and I raked leaves and fixed a loose board on the back deck, I explained to him what was happening. Your mama and uncles have been depending on me to solve their problems instead of learning to solve them themselves. So I'm going to teach them how to be independent. Like when you made me learn to tie my own shoes instead of doing it for me. Exactly like that, little man. Will they be mad for a long time? Probably. But sometimes doing the right thing makes people mad, especially when they've gotten used to doing the wrong thing. By Monday morning, I had a plan. Not just for cutting them off, but for building something better. Something that would honor Loretta's memory and create a real legacy for the grandchildren who deserved it. The Washington family was about to learn the difference between earning respect and expecting it. And I was about to discover that sometimes the best foundation you can lay is the one that gives good people a chance to build something worthwhile on top of it. It was time to stop being an enabler and start being a teacher, even if the lessons were going to hurt. The first week of December hit them like a Georgia ice storm, sudden, devastating, and impossible to ignore. I sat in Will Henderson's office on Monday morning, signing documents that would reshape my family's future, whether they liked it or not. Samuel, are you absolutely certain about these changes? Will asked, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the new will. This is pretty comprehensive. You're removing Michael, Denise, and Jerome as beneficiaries entirely. Every last one of them, I said, my signature firm and steady on each page. The house, the business assets, the investment accounts, it all goes into a trust for Marcus's education and future, with provisions for any other grandchildren who might come along and prove they deserve it. What about your children? They're going to contest this. Let them try. I've got 43 years of documentation showing exactly how they earned this decision. You got that file Maggie Ellis sent over? Will nodded, patting a thick folder on his desk. $305,000 in documented financial support over 6 years, with no repayment or even acknowledgement of the loans. Plus documentation of property improvements, free services, and other support. It's pretty damning. That's just the money. Doesn't include the disrespect, the manipulation, or leaving their child outside in the rain while they planned how to spend my inheritance. The new will was ironclad. Marcus would inherit everything when he turned 25, with distributions for education starting immediately. If something happened to Marcus, the money would go to educational scholarships for underprivileged kids in Atlanta. My 3 adult children weren't mentioned anywhere except in a clause specifically stating they were intentionally excluded due to their demonstrated pattern of financial irresponsibility and lack of respect for family values. Tuesday, I met with Maggie Ellis to establish the Marcus Washington Educational Trust. We set aside $150,000 immediately, enough to cover private school through high school and a full ride to whatever college he chose. Samuel, this is generous, Maggie said, reviewing the trust documents. But what about his current living situation? Denise is still his legal guardian. We're working on that too. I've got a family court attorney looking into emergency custody based on parental neglect. Leaving a child outside in winter weather while being inattentive to his welfare? That's grounds for a custody review. Wednesday brought the first wave of panic calls. Michael showed up at my office at Washington Construction, where my foreman Jake Williams had to escort him out when he started making a scene. Mr. Washington, Jake told me later, that boy of yours was hollering about inheritance and family loyalty. Had to remind him this is a place of business, not a family therapy session. Michael's desperate phone call came that evening while Marcus and I were working on his math homework. Dad, we need to talk. I spoke to a lawyer and he says what you're doing might not be legal. You can't just change your will to spite your children. I'm not changing it to spite anybody. I'm changing it to reward the people who actually deserve what I've worked for. This is about Thanksgiving, isn't it? Look, I'm sorry about Marcus getting locked out. That was an accident, and we all feel terrible about it. Son,
This is about 6 years of you treating me like an ATM machine. Thanksgiving was just the final straw. What if I pay you back? The money you've given me over the years." I almost laughed. "Michael, you owe me $85,000. You make $40,000 a year at that insurance company when you bother to show up. How exactly you planning to pay me back?" Silence on the other end, because the truth was, he'd never planned to pay any of it back. None of them had. Thursday brought Denise, and she came with both barrels blazing. Showed up at my front door with that worthless husband of hers, demanding I return Marcus immediately. "Daddy, you've had him for a week. This is kidnapping, and I'm not playing games anymore." I opened the door wider so she could see Marcus at the kitchen table, working on a school project about family history. He was clean, fed, happy, and engaged. Probably the most attention he'd gotten in months. Does that look like a kidnapped child to you? He's my son. Then act like his mother. When's the last time you helped him with homework? When's the last time you asked about his day without being distracted by your phone? When's the last time you put his needs before your own? Marcus looked up from his project. "Hi, Mama. Grandpa Sam is helping me make a family tree. Did you know he built over 200 houses?" Denise's face softened for a moment, but then her husband opened his mouth. "Mr. Washington, with all due respect, you can't just take someone's child because you're having family issues. Marcus Thompson, you got 2 seconds to get off my property before I call the police myself. You ain't even part of this family. You're just somebody who married into it and started spending money you didn't earn." "Daddy," Denise gasped. "The boy's right, though. I can't just take him. But I can petition for emergency custody when his parents demonstrate they can't provide adequate supervision. Your lawyer explained that to you yet?" That's when the color drained from her face. She hadn't talked to a lawyer. She'd been bluffing, hoping I'd back down like I always had before. Friday was Jerome's turn, and he tried a different approach, bringing his grandmother, my late wife's mother, to guilt me into backing down. "Samuel Washington," Mama Grace said, all 4'11" of her standing on my porch with fire in her eyes. "What is this foolishness I'm hearing about you cutting off your children?" I loved Mama Grace like my own mother, but I wasn't about to let her manipulate me either. "Come on in, Mama Grace. Let me show you something." I sat her down at my dining room table with all the financial records spread out. Every check, every bank transfer, every paid bill on their behalf. "This is what your grandbaby Loretta's children have done since she passed. $300,000, Mama Grace. More than half my retirement money gone to fund their bad decisions." She put on her reading glasses and studied the papers, her expression getting more serious with each page. "And this here," I said, pulling out photos from Thanksgiving. "This is Marcus's soaking wet clothes from when they locked him outside in the rain while they sat inside talking about how to get more money out of me." Mama Grace set down the papers and looked at me for a long moment. "Jerome, baby," she said to her grandson, "you got some explaining to do. Grandmama, it's not like he's making it sound. You were just taking advantage of a grieving widower who loved you too much to see what you were doing to him." Her voice carried the authority of 87 years of not suffering fools. "I raised your mama better than this, and she raised you better than this." Jerome tried to argue, but Mama Grace held up her hand. "Samuel, you show me where that grandbaby of mine is staying." I brought Marcus out, and Mama Grace's whole demeanor changed. She hugged him tight and asked about school, his friends, his favorite subjects. Marcus chattered away, telling her about helping me with yard work and learning about construction techniques. "Mama Grace, Grandpa Sam is teaching me how to use tools properly. He says if I'm going to build something, I need to understand how each piece works." "That's right, baby. Your great-grandpa Samuel knows about building things that last." When Jerome left that day, he was alone. Mama Grace stayed for dinner and spent the evening telling Marcus stories about his grandmother Loretta and teaching him to play spades. "Samuel," she said before leaving, "you're doing the right thing. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their choices. Loretta would be proud of you for protecting that baby and standing up for yourself." By the end of the week, the new reality was setting in for all of them. No more emergency loans. No more bailouts when they made poor financial decisions. No more free meals, free babysitting, or free handyman services. Michael's credit card bills started piling up. Denise had to explain to Marcus Thompson why they couldn't afford their mortgage payment. Jerome's business collapsed completely when he couldn't fund it with my money anymore. But the most telling moment came Sunday evening when Michael called, and for the first time in 6 years, he didn't ask for money. "Dad, I just wanted to say, I think I understand why you're angry. I've been doing some thinking this week, and maybe we haven't been treating you right. It was a start. Not much of one, but a start. Son, respect ain't something you think about giving somebody. It's something you do every day, in every interaction. Your mama understood that. Time you learned it too. What do I have to do to fix this? First, you gotta fix yourself. Get your finances in order. Start taking responsibility for your own life, and stop expecting other people to solve your problems. Then maybe we can talk about rebuilding some trust. And Marcus? Marcus stays with me until his mama proves she can be a responsible parent. That boy deserves better than being treated like an inconvenience." That night, I tucked Marcus into bed, and he asked me the question I'd been dreading. "Grandpa Sam, are Mama and the uncles ever going to come back?" "They'll come back when they're ready to be family instead of just people who want things from family. Might take a while, though." "That's okay. I like living here with you. You listen when I talk, and you teach me things, and you never make me feel like I'm bothering you." Out of the mouths of babes. The foundation was laid. Now it was time to see what kind of structure we could build on top of it. 6 months later, I was sitting on my front porch on a warm May evening, watching Marcus practice the batting stance I'd taught him in the backyard. The boy had grown 2 inches since Thanksgiving, and not just in height. He carried himself different now, with the confidence that comes from knowing somebody believes in you completely. The custody hearing had gone exactly as Will Henderson predicted. When the judge heard about Marcus being locked outside in the rain while his parents were inside discussing financial matters, and when the court-appointed guardian ad litem interviewed Marcus about where he felt safest and most cared for, the decision was unanimous. I was granted full custody, with Denise getting supervised visitation rights that she had to earn back through parenting classes and family counseling. "Strike 3, Marcus called out, swinging at an imaginary pitch. "Grandpa Sam, did you see that? Perfect form, just like you showed me." "I saw it, little man. Your stance is getting solid as concrete." Concrete. That word still meant everything to me, but now it meant something different too. It meant the foundation I was building with Marcus, one based on respect, responsibility, and genuine love instead of financial dependence. The phone rang inside the house, and I knew without looking that it was probably one of my children. They'd all been calling more regularly since Christmas, when I'd made it clear that the new arrangement was permanent. But the nature of those calls had changed dramatically. "I'll get it, Grandpa Sam." Marcus dropped his bat and ran inside, full of the energy that 8-year-old boys carry like electricity. A minute later, he came back with the cordless phone. "It's Uncle Michael. He says it's important." I took the phone, noting that Marcus had said Uncle Michael without any of the tension that used to creep into his voice when the adults were about to have money conversations. "Hey, Dad." Michael's voice sounded different than it had 6 months ago. Humbler. More tired, but also more genuine. "I wanted to call and tell you something." "I'm listening, son." "I got the promotion. Regional manager for the Southeast Division. Comes with a 40% salary increase and a company car." "That's good news, Michael. You worked hard for that." "Yeah, I did. 60-hour weeks for the past 4 months. Night classes to get my insurance certification updated, and I had to prove myself all over again after I got my act together. After he stopped expecting handouts and started earning his way. After he learned that success comes from work, not from having a father with a checkbook. I'm proud of you, son. Your mama would be proud too." There was silence on the other end for a moment, and when Michael spoke again, his voice was thick with emotion. "Dad, I owe you an apology. A real one, not just sorry because I got caught. I spent 6 years treating you like you owed me something instead of recognizing everything you'd already given me. I was entitled, disrespectful, and I took advantage of your love." These were words I'd waited 6 years to hear, but now that they were coming, I felt more sadness than vindication. Sadness for all the time we'd lost, all the relationship damage that could have been avoided if he'd learned these lessons earlier. "Apology accepted, Michael. But more important than apologizing to me is making sure you don't pass those attitudes down to the next generation. I understand. And Dad? Jasmine and I broke up. Turns out when I couldn't afford to take her to expensive restaurants anymore, she lost interest real quick. You were right about her. Some lessons hurt more than others, but they stick better too. Son, find yourself a woman who loves you when you're struggling just as much as when you're succeeding. That's what your mama did for me. After Michael hung up, Marcus came and sat beside me on the porch swing. Uncle Michael sounded happy. He said, "Yeah, he did. He's learning some important lessons about life." "Is that why you made them stop taking money from you? So they could learn lessons?" This boy's insight never stopped amazing me. "That's exactly right, little man. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is stop making life too easy for them. Like when you made me learn to do my own laundry instead of doing it for me. Just like that." We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun set over the neighborhood I'd helped build. 3 houses on this street had been constructed by Washington construction crews, and every time I looked at them, I felt the satisfaction that comes from creating something solid and lasting. Denise had been to visit twice in the past month, both times following the court-mandated schedule. The visits were awkward at first. She didn't know how to relate to her own son without the chaos and distraction of her previous lifestyle. But Marcus, bless his heart, was patient with her, and I could see small improvements each time. She'd completed her parenting classes and was working with a family counselor on what the court called rebuilding healthy relationships. More importantly, she'd separated from Marcus Thompson after realizing that his financial demands were preventing her from being the mother Marcus deserved. "I never knew how much I was missing," she'd told me during her last visit, watching Marcus explain a science project he'd been working on. "I was so worried about money and status that I forgot to pay attention to my own child." Jerome had taken the longest to come around. His pride was hurt worse than the others, probably because he'd always seen himself as the smart one, the business-minded one who was going to show the old man how modern success worked. It took him 4 months to realize that modern success still required the same ancient virtues: hard work, integrity, and delivering value to other people. He'd finally swallowed his pride in March and taken a job with a legitimate construction company, Henderson Construction, the same company where I'd started as a day laborer 50 years ago. Will Henderson Sr. had called to ask if I minded, and I'd told him that Jerome needed to learn what honest work felt like. "He's got potential," Will Sr. had said. "Got his daddy's eye for quality and attention to detail. Just needed some humbling." The humbling was working. Jerome called every Sunday now, not to ask for money, but to tell me about what he'd learned that week, what projects he was working on, and how much respect he'd gained for the physical demands of construction work. "Pops, I never understood how hard you worked," he'd said during his last call. "I thought business was about making deals and finding shortcuts. I didn't realize that the best foundation for any success is just showing up every day and doing excellent work." As Marcus and I rocked on that porch swing, I thought about the new foundation I'd built for this family. The Marcus Washington Educational Trust was growing steadily, managed by Maggie Ellis and invested conservatively but wisely. By the time Marcus turned 18, there would be enough for any college in the country, plus graduate school if he wanted it. But more important than the money was the example I was trying to set. Marcus was learning that resources came from work, that respect was earned through actions, and that family meant caring for each other instead of using each other. "Grandpa Sam," Marcus said suddenly, "when I grow up, I want to build houses like you did. That's a fine profession, little man. But remember, the most important thing isn't what you build. It's how you treat the people around you while you're building it." "I know. You've taught me that. Family is about love and respect, not money." Out of the mouths of babes. The Loretta Washington Memorial Scholarship had been established in April, funded with $100,000 from my retirement account. It would provide full college tuition for one deserving student from South Atlanta each year, kids who had the intelligence and work ethic to succeed but lacked the financial resources. The first recipient was a young woman named Keisha Johnson, whose single mother worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table. "Mrs. Johnson reminds me of your grandmother," I'd told Marcus at the scholarship ceremony, "working twice as hard as everybody else to give her child opportunities she never had." That's what real legacy looked like, not just passing money down to people who expected it, but creating opportunities for people who would appreciate them and use them wisely. As darkness settled over the neighborhood, Marcus and I went inside to work on his homework. He was reading a book about Frederick Douglass for his history class, and his questions showed the kind of deep thinking that made me proud. Grandpa Sam, why did Frederick Douglass think education was so important for freed slaves? Because he understood that real freedom comes from being able to take care of yourself. Money that somebody gives you can be taken away, but knowledge and skills belong to you forever. Is that why you made the uncles learn to take care of themselves? That's exactly why. Later that evening, after Marcus was asleep, I sat in my home office looking at family photos. There was Loretta on our wedding day, radiant in white satin. There were pictures of Michael, Denise, and Jerome as children, smiling, innocent, full of potential.
And there were newer pictures of Marcus at various school events, his gap-toothed grin reminding me why all the struggle had been worth it. The phone rang again, and this time it was Denise. "Daddy, I just wanted to thank you again for keeping Marcus safe. I know you didn't have to take custody, and I know I gave you every reason not to trust me with him. Denise, that boy is the light of my life. I'd do anything to protect him and give him the childhood he deserves. I can see that."
And Daddy, I think I'm finally understanding what Mama used to tell us about how much you sacrificed for us. I never appreciated it when I should have. The past is the past, baby girl. What matters now is what we do going forward. I want to earn the right to be his mother again, not just legally, but really. I want him to feel as safe and loved with me as he does with you. That's going to take time and consistency, but if you're serious about it, I'll help you however I can.
After we hung up, I walked through my house, the house I'd built with my own hands for the woman I loved and the family we'd created together. Every room held memories. Every nail and board represented hours of honest labor and careful planning. But now it held something else, too. Hope. Hope that the foundation I'd laid with Marcus would be stronger than the one that had crumbled with his parents. Hope that sometimes tearing down what's broken allows you to build something better in its place. The next morning was Saturday, and Marcus and I had plans to visit the job site where Jerome was working. I wanted Marcus to see his uncle learning the same lessons I'd tried to teach all my children years ago, that there's dignity in hard work, pride in craftsmanship, and satisfaction in building something that will outlast you. As I tucked Marcus into bed that night, he said something that made my heart full. "Grandpa Sam, I'm glad you're my family. You make me feel important. You are important, little man. You're the most important thing in my world. I love you, Grandpa Sam. I love you too, son." And as I turned off his bedroom light, I realized that sometimes the best foundation you can lay is built not with concrete and steel, but with love, respect, and the determination to do right by the people who matter most. The Washington family was being rebuilt from the ground up, one relationship at a time. And this time, I was going to make sure the foundation was strong enough to last for generations.